Well, thank you so much for. I'm nothing if not prompt. My old coach a long time ago. I should do a little introduction to who I am first. My name is Will Greenwood. I'm not a knight of the realm like Trevor Phillips, but I am an MBE, but not an OB. He trumps me on absolutely everything. It's amazing what they give you when you win a World Cup a long time ago. My old coach used to say something called Lombardi time. There was an American football coach called Vince Lombardi with the Green Bay Packers, and Lombardi time meant if a meeting started at 10:40. You were rocked and rolled, ready to go at 10:36, 10:35, and I'm glad to say all the panelists were bang on cue. What are we going to do? First of all, I'm going to thank Sir Trevor and Rebecca for the previous session. It was a fascinating chat. Um, Author of a book called Five Generations at Work: How We Win Together for Good. By the way, I categorically believe that I'm going to ask you a question at the end if I can remember Mina, Becky, and Pritesh. If you were to write a book, this is going to come back at the end. If you were writing a book, what book, what book would you write? I'm going to go back to that. So you've got 40 minutes in between all the different questions, and then we're going to get into a small. Oh, in me, I was a rugby player a long time ago. I worked for an AI business called Affinity, and having met Raj and Fiona and many of the team, I've come on board here at Green Park. You could sort of say business development, look after some customers, try and find some new ones, support the team. We did a culture session last week, which was absolutely fabulous. And just, yeah, muck in, roll sleeves up, metaphorically and physically, and get involved. So it's an absolute honor to welcome three outstanding panelists today. And so rather than me try and give you your job titles, could I ask you, we'll go Meena, Becky, Pritesh, if that's all right. Could I ask you to, what am I going to say? Could you give us a headline on what you do? And then could you describe to everyone your work superpower? Mina, you're up first.
Right now?
Yeah,
Ah,
fire.
okay.
No problem.
So I'm Meena Anand. I'm the CEO of City HR. In terms of describing my work, I've been supporting HR professionals and being their personal cheerleader for the last 4 years. If you don't know City HR, it's a trade organization, not for profit. We support 150 financial services firms, and we've been going for 50 years.
And your superpower?
My superpower, actually, I'm beginning to realize is probably a connector.
Why are you such a good connector? Can I double down on that just to get a little bit of an insight
Yeah,
into
it's
you, the person?
interesting. It's only recently kind of come to mind, but I often get people that I meet from all sorts of different places in my in personal life, work life, previously, when I've lived in different places, and suddenly they end up all in the same place. And you just think, oh, actually, you ought to speak to so and so.
Yeah, I love that. My parents were both school teachers, and I think my mum stole a phrase from a great philosopher, and it said every child can learn, and if the child isn't learning, find a different way to teach.
Love it.
And I think that's clearly describes what you do. It's an amazing superpower to have. Becky in Estonia feels like the Eurovision Song Contest. Let's go to Estonia. And Becky, can you bring the scores in and tell us who you are, what you do, and your superpower?
Well, yes, I am in Estonia, but I am also from the UK, so I hope that you'll give me more than, well, at least 1 point today. So yes, I'm the Chief People Officer for LHV Bank in the UK. Our parent is in Estonia, hence why I'm here at the moment. And yeah, I've been here since August 21. We built the bank from scratch in the UK. So it's been an incredible journey. And we have about 225 people across 5 different locations, 3 different business lines. So lots of things happening, but yeah, lots of interesting, hopefully experiences that we can draw on and from before around culture and what it means in the context of financial services. But that
Great. And what's your superpower?
um I'm a fixer, so
Mm.
I I love a what I would describe as a messy bedroom. Give me a problem. I like the stuff that nobody else can work out how to do. So I love working with early stage companies where you're sort of head of everything, head of nothing, big dream. Everybody thinks you're sort of slightly crazy, but um, yeah, I'm a fixer, builder, creator.
I love it. Were you STEM at school, or were you maths, science, technology, engineering, or were you creative, left brain, right brain?
I was the annoying why child. Not, I don't break rules, but I do challenge like what, but why? Help me understand why. So I would say like what I try to bring to work is actually data, like data driven decision making, but also does it feel right? So we think a lot about those two things to make sure that
Brilliant.
hopefully we get to the right answer.
Amazing. We've got a connector, we've got a fixer. It feels like the great escape. So now we'll go to Pratesh and work out what he does at Chubb and what his superpower is.
Thanks, Will. So nice to meet you all. I'm Pratesh. I head up the talent team here at Chubb in EMEA. So we're a global insurance company headquartered in the US. And so in my role, I look after all things talent. So talent acquisition, talent management, learning, development, performance, culture, and inclusion. And this is my second stint at Chubb. So I'm a boomerang hire. I was here for 7 years in a previous life, and 9 months back, or actually 10 months today, back into my new role at Chubb. And my superpower is, I think it's really a superpower. I think it's just says a bit about me. Is I like to bring a bit of fun into the workplace. So we're all busy business professionals, and trying to support our CEOs and business leaders on their journey there on. But I am a big advocate of let's have a bit of fun on the way and camaraderie, both myself in the way I am, but also the teams that I lead and the way I like to work as well.
Amazing, awesome. Connector, fixer, fun, and just for purposes, I'm detail. I'm a detail guy.
Yeah.
Love getting down into the weeds, working out. I'm not a strategist. I worked out a long time ago. I don't want to be a CEO, but I think I'm a really good number two. So if I've got a good number one who's telling us, what the vision is, where we're going to be in 5 years, I will put my boots on and we will get there. So it's often a question, and some of the team at Green Park know this. Every time I sit around at a table, I try to work out what knowledge gap are we missing. But actually, when we look at today with a connector, a fixer, a man of fun and detail, we've got a good 360-degree view of the mountain. And today's mountain is culture versus strategy. Which wins? Now, I'm hoping there's going to be a little bit of nuance. We seem to have gone binary in this world. We seem to have gone red or blue, right or left. And actually, hopefully, we can explore using some cracking vocabulary where we might sit and where it works well for our organizations. So, if I can start with you, Mina, strategy and culture, when they collide, which one needs to win for long-term success?
So I'm a bit of a research geek. And so if you had looked at the quote, everybody attributes that culture eats strategy for breakfast quote to Peter Drucker. Actually, he basically he said, actually, I didn't say it. He just used it to promote a business model where strategy, actually, he was talking about strategy versus culture. The person that said it, and actually, when you think about the next part of the quote, is Jack Welch. The next part of the quote actually is, but structure eats culture for lunch.
Right.
So things like, and when he means structure, he means kind of, the leadership power bases that exist. So for me, I think culture is actually a strategy
Yeah.
that leaders can choose to follow, double down on, or indeed kind of leave it to the organization to decide, because they will be a culture.
Yeah. Fabulous, Mina. And I think that's sort of, I know that Pratesh likes fun. I know you said what culture eats strategy for breakfast, but
Structure eats culture for lunch.
for lunch. Well, I've got a great joke. Why did six hate seven? Because seven, eight, nine. But there's a follow-up to that. Why did seven hate nine? Seven,
No,
eight,
I know.
because he wanted 3 square meals a day. So anyway, so
Love it.
if we go to Becky, intentional culture at LHV, how much of it is there, and how important is it in your organization?
Well, I'm so glad you asked me this question because when I was looking at the list, I thought of all the questions that I'd like to answer, it is actually this one because I in the last 4 years, everything that we've done to create this brilliant environment in the UK has been intentional. And maybe if I just give you a little bit of context to help bring this to life. So our parent is an Estonian Baltic Nasdaq listed company. It was founded by some incredible people, basically entrepreneurs who were building something for entrepreneurs, and that spirit is very much alive and kicking in the business today. And when I joined the business, I didn't know anything about Estonia. In fact, I've got to be honest, I had to look on the map to see where it was when I got a phone call about a job in Estonia. And I had to learn very quickly about, the culture, the values, how things work, because I was one of a small number of people. There were 1,000 Estonian people, but what I could see in business terms is that this was a super successful company, 1.2 billion euro market cap, constantly delivering excellent ROE for shareholders, great culture, really brilliant engagement scores, best place to work in Estonia, best place to bank. And I'm like, they're doing something right. So the best chance I've got of building a fantastic business in the UK is to copy some of that. And that's exactly what I did. So it needed to be translated into UK terms. And context, I think, is key, and the size and the scale and the complexity of our business is different because it was embryonic and we were building things. And what you do at the beginning of building a company and what you do when it's 25 years old, which is what we have here, is somewhat different. But I think the culture and the values are very, very aligned. We have some really clear values that I think this is one of the probably the only companies I've worked in where I can honestly say that we live and breathe our values.
Becky, can I dive in there and say, because we were doing this last week with Green Park, trying to work out some of the values that are really important to the staff that work here, and it was really clear. And I think repetition sometimes, I hope some of yours pop up that are exactly the same at Green. But what are your values?
Well, I'm going to apologise in advance in case I offend anybody, because one of our values is no bullshit. And
one of Raj's favourite lines, but there's a slight variation on it, but it's
for people that don't like the latter part of that word, I kind of translate that, and I think it is important because it should be translated. So, we are an inclusive environment and we don't want to offend anybody, but it's no nonsense. We're straightforward, we're honest, we're respectful. It's all of those things. And, in banking, certainly, nobody wants to bank with anybody that's going to bullshit them. So I think it's brilliant in terms of, we treat, how we treat our customers and shareholders. We're straightforward, open, honest, adult to adult. The second value, and honestly, this is the reason why I joined the company, because I think it's going to be etched on my headstone, is never satisfied. Not in an ungrateful sense, in a sense of there's always got to be a better way. There's always got to be an opportunity to learn. There's always got to be an opportunity to reflect and think about how we move forward. So it's symbolic of progression and innovation and the entrepreneurialism that exists. And then the final one is basically to be agile, and there needs to be plans and structure for sure, and a very clear goal and ambition, which is, I think, where the strategy is important. We just had a big dream. That was the strategy was to build a bank, but it was a dream, and how we got there was equally as important in terms of the environment that we were creating, what we stood for, what kind of people we needed to help us on that journey. So the agility is important in the sense of, like, we're not striving for perfection. It's not a realistic thing to expect of anybody. We're all humans. We make mistakes. We want to create a safe environment where you can, fail, obviously safely, not causing any damage to anybody. But failing is about learning and progressing and evolving. And I think those three things are super helpful in terms of describing the culture and how we would like people to
Love those answers. Just have to scribble some notes down in the background because we had a quote with the rugby team I was involved in, which was perfection is unattainable, but if you chase perfection, you catch excellence.
Yeah.
Which is always a
Love
nice one
that.
for us to go after it.
Mm,
And then I know you said never satisfied. My strapline, if I was to have something on my headstone, it would be in the pursuit of better, which I
mm,
hope sort of brings
mm,
that to life a little bit. Just try and finish each day a little bit smarter, a little bit faster,
mm,
a little bit whatever it might be, whatever your metric is you're measuring.
mm.
Each day, just try and finish it a little bit better. Pritesh, I know you've been hanging on to chat in culture for a while. The microphone is yours. And I'm just trying to work out how to phrase this. How do you make culture an enabler of strategy rather than perhaps a barrier where people feel like it could be some on occasion treading on eggshells.
Yeah. And thank you, Becky and Mina, for kind of laying the foundations there for me to build on. I think one of my reflections when thinking about this is around culture and strategy. Sometimes we think of them as paradoxes at either ends of the spectrum, and we kind of think of it as an either or type scenario or equation. And I guess I'm kind of coming at it from a could it not also be an and also, so culture and strategy, or culture also strategy.
Yeah.
And I think my other reflection on that point, if you think about it as a paradox and how you make it an and also or an and or, is we as HR practitioners, HR leaders have got a role to kind of help our business leaders bridge that gap potentially, and find the linkages between the culture and the strategy. So to answer your question, Will, I think the strategy can flex and needs to flex because the market changes, product shift, sentiment moves, adapts, and the strategy needs to shift with that. A new CEO might have a different approach, different vision. But to your point, Becky, I think the culture is the thing that is the kind of pegs in the ground that are consistent, if that makes sense. And so the way I think about bridging that gap or bridging that paradox and that tension is that you just need to change the dynamic and the shift of those pegs in the stand, depending on where the strategy is going and where you need to spike on those elements of the culture that you spoke about, Becky, whether it's entrepreneurialism or agility, or no nonsense, is the more political savvy way to say the other one you said, is where do you need to spike to allow that strategy to flourish is the kind of
Yeah,
way that I think about it in order to enable the two to come together.
I love that because I think you can have collision rich and sort of disagree agreeably about opinions
Totally.
which might relate to sort of strategy. But
Mm,
actually, culture are those things where they're not quite your red lines, but by and large, because they're not tablets coming down from Mount Sinai stuck in stone for the next 2,000 years, but an organization needs to have a North Star,
yeah.
needs to have a guiding light as to how they're going to behave around each other.
Mm,
So it's sort of halfway through the session, and we've sort of been through the culture v strategy, which wins. Again, all these are variations on a theme today. The next sort of
Yes.
subtopic is sort of accountability for growth. And let's go. Why don't we go in reverse order? Meaning you're not offended if we go in reverse order.
No, you go for it.
Pritesh is on a roll here. Uh, and just to understand Pritesh, where would you see accountability breaking down most often? And if I go back to Becky, who liked to ask why, and why does it break down most often?
mm. I think accountability is key, when you're thinking about, culture. Um, and the way I kind of think about it is, our leaders have a role as kind of culture carriers in the business and to really kind of fly the flag top down around their expectations, around what they expect from the organization, I guess.
Yeah,
Um, and so I think where that has a propensity to break down is potentially when there is misalignment or ambiguity around, well, who are we and what do we stand for? Because one of the reflections I also had, Becky, as you were speaking, is I think there's a role for our leaders to set the narrative from the top, hold their leaders accountable, but also communicate that, right? Because I think, and I'm talking internally and externally, one of the beauties of my role, kind of bringing talent together in the broadest sense, is I can kind of see the internal lens around where are there opportunities to talk about our culture and take our people on the journey, but also how we're communicating that externally to prospective new hires at Chubb. And so to answer your question, I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but I think I think the accountability is throughout the organization. It needs to come top down, but I also think we've got a missed opportunity at times as various organizations to sometimes communicate
they've
that
got to
and
walk.
talk about
The
that.
senior leaders have to embody it, haven't they? And then from there, we always talked about culture is what you tolerate, not what you sort of preach. Can I just ask, have you ever had to hold a leader at Chubb accountable? Have they ever crossed the pegs in the ground, not quite hit the right notes? And how do
No,
you
I
go
don't think
about
so.
addressing that?
No, I don't think so. I think kind of the analogy I give is everyone knows the football pitch they need to play in, right? And I think in various organizations at different times, I'm sure all of us have had to kind of manage making sure that people know what that football pitch is and where those pegs in the ground are. So
Yeah.
no, not necessarily. I think there is something about though, how do you differentiate the roles that different people play in the organization? So I think there's more front office type roles and leadership positions, and then there's the kind of functional leadership positions. And I think sometimes leaders can come at it from a different perspective, right? And it also comes from whether you sat in a region, whether you're sat in HQ, or whether you're sat in a kind of different seat. The role you play, I think, can also influence how you think about things, either in your vertical, in your P&L, in your function, or whether you're kind of stepping up and looking back and looking across the organization and thinking enterprise. So
Great.
I think that's a useful perspective.
Yeah, and so I'm going to pick up that word enterprise and just move on to Becky and go, how do employees at LHV, how are they allowed to take responsibility for sort of, I'd say building enterprise IP, you might put value instead of IP, but building the quality of an organization and not just trying to grow personal success.
Yeah. Well, I think just thinking about what I just heard there. Sorry, I've got you've sparked loads of ideas in my mind, so thank you for that. I absolutely agree. Accountability comes with like really, you need to be really clear about where you're heading, and if that for whatever reason becomes vague, or it seems that people are going off in a different direction, then accountability is more challenging. But I think if I think about it in the context of our business, we have this we have some very clear things that we're trying to do. Ultimately, we want to delight our shareholders and build a sustainable, profitable business. There's lots of other things that we want to do. We want to build, a brilliant environment for people that is inclusive and allows growth and all those good things. But we have tried to be actually not very prescriptive on this point for very deliberate reasons, which is you can be anything you want to be within reason. If you have potential to grow and you can see an opportunity and you can see that there's things that you can take accountability for that are perhaps not within your, kind of day-to-day remit, then we encourage that. Come and talk to us about what you can grab hold of and where you can create value. So and it sounds a little bit chaotic, but it's honestly not. It's about, I think, embracing that wonderful entrepreneurial spirit that is in operation. And actually, one of my team reminded me of this of a good example of this today, because we were talking about this very topic, and somebody that used to work in our people team could see, this was a number of years ago, that there was a need for somebody to take on responsibility for ESG, and she was super passionate about it, and she went from being working on employer brand initiatives to being the head of ESG for the bank. So I guess just to kind of wrap that up, and apologies, I'm also rambling a little bit here. So I think empowerment, autonomy, and high trust go sort of hand in hand with the notion of accountability. I think when you see people maybe stepping away from accountability, it's because they don't understand or don't believe. They don't feel like they're truly accountable. Maybe somebody else is influencing their decisions, or they are afraid that, the accountabilities that they carry may may have consequences. So I think creating a good environment where people can make mistakes but
Yeah.
progress is important. I
Freedom
don't know if
within a
that answers your
frame.
question,
No,
but
it does absolutely sort of freedom within a framework. You're just
Yeah,
picking up a
totally.
little bit on what Pritesh has said. Obviously, there
Mm.
has to be those sort of those barriers that the red lines, but within that empowerment to feel like again, when you're a part of a team, you want to feel like you've got a hand on the steering wheel.
yeah.
You're part of it, helping to drive it. And by the way, if you ever want an uplifting song, yeah, I think you said about you could be anything that you want to be. I don't know if you remember the great film Bugsy Malone.
Hmm.
There's a song called Bad Guys. We could have been
Love
anything that
that.
we wanted to be. So if you ever want to fire up a party, get the disco version of that up, and the place will go crazy. Now, I mean, I've got a load of questions I can, but I'm also conscious that you're listening to what Pritesh and Becky are
Mm.
saying. And rather than specifically then pigeonhole you with a question, I might give you the freedom within the framework. We're sort of talking about accountability for growth. What have you listened to from a Pritesh or Becky, or what idea would you like to bring to this
Yeah.
discussion rather than me force you down an alleyway?
No, I mean, I think it's really, really helpful to kind of see how Chubb and LVH actually um, echo this in practice. I guess what I was going to come at it from is really, there's some individuals that are accountable for the culture of the organization from a fiduciary perspective. I
Yeah,
mean, your board actually has direct accountability for ensuring the kind of culture of the organization actually aligns to the strategy of the organization and supports long-term success. So that's one thing I'd kind of say. And sometimes, I mean, certainly, I'm really pleased that Pritesh had never had to call it out, leaders out. I've had to call out leaders many times, and actually having that as a backdrop, particularly in FS, is helpful. Um, the phone never rings, and of course, if you can hear that.
no,
The second thing I was going to talk about is actually accountability is really challenging because the roles that we have, particularly in financial services, are really complex. And the fact is, individual accountability is probably less of an issue. I think actually having team accountability is really is more interesting because roles are more complicated. You can't do it on your own. And so I think that's the kind of second thing I'd say is actually moving from individual accountability to actually how do you hold a team accountable for the outcome? And the last bit is I can't not talk about financial services culture without talking about our regulators, right? So, I mean, our regulators, to be fair, have been really supportive of actually ensuring what good looks like in terms of culture across financial services. I mean, so Trevor talked about the financial services crash, and I think since then, I do think the regulators have actually really held organisations in financial services feet to account, feet to the fire. And so, yeah, they're the kind of three things that were going through my mind.
yeah, quality. I love that you can't do it on your own. Again, I always forget some of the quotes where I pick them up from, but none of us is as good as all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is absolutely the right thing. So let's move on to a slightly different topic. Let's talk about international growth, if that's okay, and future value. And I suppose the question, let's go to Becky first, seeing as how you're in Estonia. What's different about leading people and winning clients across borders?
Um, I don't. I
There might
honestly,
be none.
I don't. I think if you kind of take it all back to the most, I like to keep things very simple, and ultimately, often you're dealing with people, so understanding individual needs or collective needs, and understanding what drives people, motivates people, wherever you are in the world, like people still have those needs. There are definitely cultural differences, nuances, things that you really need to understand and need to respect. But I think if you start with, well, I say try and remember this when I'm talking to my team or the business about certain things. What does it mean for our people and what does it mean for our customers? And we have to be able to answer those two questions really clearly. And, is that just your opinion? How many other opinions have you saw? And I'm not talking about, kind of creating big debates about things that, don't need big debates on, but making sure that you've got different minds around the table. Diversity of thought is super important. Does this work for you, or does it work for many? So it shouldn't, maybe I'm thinking about it too simplistically, but apart from, the barrier of probably native language, everything else I think can be simplified to get to the right answer.
I think one of the for
pick up on that. Just run with the baton there.
I was going to say, is I think one of our kind of key tenets around culture is global mindset. So I think where it could be an inhibitor, possibly Becky and others, feel free to opine, is when organizations are just thinking mono country, mono line, they're not kind of thinking our leaders need to embrace that global mindset and embracing that we are one organization that is across multiple geographies with different cultural nuances. But if they haven't got that wiring, as I call it, that can sometimes be a potential blocker to driving growth potential. I'm just throwing it out there for the panel.
And just to follow up on that one, Pradesh, because one of the questions I've got is how do you build one culture across multiple geographies without losing local relevance and understanding that I know there's another phrase. Often people say, treat people as if you'd like to be treated. I think it's the worst phrase in the world. I think you should treat people as if they would like to be treated. And therefore, in order to do that, you've got to find out what's them. So sometimes what might work for one culture might not work for another. So I'm just trying to work out, how do you navigate that sort of barrier when building cross-border?
I mean, I think, Will, from my perspective, and just following up on that, treat people how they want to be treated. I mean, I've managed many global teams in the past, and the biggest thing for me is really around expectation management, and that looks very different in different cultures and different countries. And so I think it's incumbent upon the leader to kind of think about expectation management, but also use the cultural nuances that Becky's described, because inevitably there will be, whether you like it or not, there will be cultural nuances. Patricia's point about functional lines, there'll be nuances around culture in terms of functional lines, there'll be nuances around countries. But I think, but managing expectations, given the complexity of those cultural nuances, is really the art of international growth and where you can start to add real value.
And how much time, and please just feel free to speak first and you get the microphone is yours. How much time do you actually spend within the organizations that you all work for on creating a culture, a teamship charter, a social charter, a set of values and behaviors? Is it something you double down on, or is it something you understand is there, but assume that the fact they've got through the door means they've already bought into it?
No, definitely not. I mean, honestly, I think I sort of joke about this, but part of my job is like keeping the magic alive and head of security. So making sure we only, we really only hire the right people. And by the right people, I really want to be clear on this point. It's not about cultural fit. It's about cultural add. We want many different minds, many different people. But I think this is keeping, observing what's happening all day, every day is a fundamental part of my job. You can see if things are going wrong culturally or actually what's working and what do we need to do more of. But I don't think you can go, we've hired 100 people or whatever it is, and we think they're all good and that's it, my work here is done, because as different things, things change, businesses grow, there's different dynamics, and all those things test culture, test relationships, test how people respond to situations. And I'm sure this really resonates with you with your kind of sporting background, but I think if you're winning, there's one mindset, and then if you've had like you've lost a lot of games, like it's how do you kind of think calmly under pressure and still do the right things and still behave in the right way. So it's not about policing, don't get me wrong, or being kind of overly directive, but it's about making sure that you can really sense what's going on and intervene quickly if something's happening that needs to be
Yeah.
remedied or
I love that, Becky. I don't know if you've stumbled across it by accident. Your research is incredible. Did you know about teacups?
Clive. Yes.
So I don't know if you picked up, but you said think calm. We actually used to call it think
Yeah.
correctly under pressure. And it's called
Yes.
teacup, and that
Mm.
ability when all not the bullets are flying, because I shouldn't use military analogies. We spent a lot of time with the Marines, but we often talked about on a rugby field when the elbows are flying and the heart rate's at 180, can you still make good decisions? Teacups, I love it. I love a teacup.
It's it's
Mate,
brilliant. I think about it a lot when I'm hiring leaders, because often, you are attractive to somebody because you're successful and, you're trying to hire the best people. But, I'm always curious, like how do you operate when you're under pressure? Because, ultimately, you need people that can think sensibly and not panic.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I
brilliant.
actually love I'm not sure if you've read the All Blacks
Yeah.
book as well.
Yes. No, I've written it. I've not written it. I have read it a little bit. I try and avoid learning about the All Blacks, but I do absolutely. I've
I love
admired them for a long time.
yeah, there's lots of things, but definitely one thing that sticks in my mind is like they always sweep the sheds. So even if they,
Yeah.
what had the best game ever, like everybody sweeps the sheds, and that's definitely influenced how I try and do my work day to day. I am happy to clean up
I was
because
going
you
to pick up.
find out.
Joanna was just asking on the chat. I just picked it up. What does teacup mean? It's
Yeah.
think correctly under pressure. And what Dave Lewis, who was at Tesco's, Sir Dave Lewis for a long time, often talked about. People say, "Oh, trust your gut, trust your gut." He says, "But if you trust your gut when you aren't in complete control of your basics, then you're simply gambling. So you've got to be in complete control of your basics, and then you can teacup. So it's that sort of what chicken or egg, what comes first. It's again, it's all in the nuance. I promised that everyone that I've got a couple of minutes left. I'd come back to the question: what book would you write? And I don't mind the world's duffest, craziest, cheesiest answer. But to finish it all off, because I know Pritesh likes a bit of fun, Mina, let's start with you. If you were going to write a book, what would it be?
Yeah, I've often thought about this. So for mine, it would be stories from the desk of an HRD.
Oh, nice. Okay. But yeah,
Mm.
I bet it's got some interesting tales.
You'll have to read the book, Will.
I can't wait. Where are you going with it, Pritesh?
Where am I going with it? I've been on quite a development journey over the last 10, 15 years. And I've learned a lot almost by accident. So my book's a bit cheesy, but it would almost be a book to myself when I was younger to kind of say, hey, look, here's things to watch out for. Here's things that you've learned through this journey, good and bad.
Nice.
So I've written in the background, I've got three children. And from day dot, every time something's happened or something, a life stage or things are going on that I feel like this would help them when they get married and they decide to have children. So I'm actually handing down a book on parenting. One is keep your calm when you're putting the sun cream on because you are an absolute toe rag. Okay. Becky, what about you?
Well, I was going to write a book on something, but I've actually changed my mind. So it initially started with I worked with a lot of highly acquisitive businesses and trying to sort of smash cultures together and basically how not to do it. But I've sort of moved on from that because the topic that I'm super interested in and I am genuinely concerned about preserving my profession is like the role of AI, EQ, and IQ, and how they all work together. Should they work together? What can be replaced? What can we use LLMs for, and what should we absolutely not? But thinking about all the real life examples of where I believe, hopefully, I bring human value. Like, what is that, and how do I almost code that?
Yeah.
So,
Well, the AI business, we often talk about augmented AI to understand, bringing the human element to it. So look, we're out of time. We've had structure eats culture for lunch. You can't do it on your own from stuff like that. What good looks like from me and Becky. I love it. No nonsense. Never satisfied. You brought teacups back to my attention and cultural ad, which I thought was a fascinating couplet of words. And Pritesh was talking about strategy can flex, but culture, your pegs in the ground. Hold your leaders accountable. And I love this last one. Beware of ambiguity. I think great teams over communicate. It's going to be thank you so much, Mina, Becky, and Pritesh. It's going to be a short. I'm always intrigued when someone writes short 5 minute break because it's either I'm detailed. It's either a 5 minute break or it's not a 5 minute break. If it's a short 5 minute break, it would be a 4 minute break. Anyway, sorry, back on my detailed stuff. It's a short 5 minute break, and the next session is the DEI backlash, fake news, rebrand, or another line in the sand. We've got a cracking panel. But from all of us at Green Park on today's Global Talent Conference, can I thank once and finally Mina, Becky, and Pritesh.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you.
See you later.